of great things to share with you guys today. And I was looking very forward to Wednesday. There we go. Okay, perfect. Can you see it? Okay, awesome. All right, guys. So gratitude, would love to hear something that you guys are grateful for today. I actually am grateful. Easter is my favorite holiday. For those of you that did not know that, I like it better than Christmas and birthdays and all those things. I love Easter. I don't really know why, to be honest, but I just always have. I love Easter. If Caitlin's on, she and my brother will be looking forward to Sunday because so Graham, my nephew, was born like a couple days before Easter, but he came home on Easter Day. So this will be my 4th year in a row that I go to their house really late the night before Easter or really early the morning of Easter and deliver about 500 Easter eggs in their front yard. And it's so fun. It's my favorite thing to do. My brother's like, are you going to clean all those up or after you do that? Or are we doing that? But no, I love Easter. So very grateful for that. Oh, Caitlin is on. Yay. Dawn, yes, family. We get to see our parents this weekend. That's great. Love that so much. So would love to hear what else you guys are grateful for. Definitely is a good time of year to be very grateful. Also, I don't know about you guys, but Abby, you're on. Oh my gosh, I was getting ready to say, is school out today? So awesome. Week off with your boys. Amy, grateful for chocolate. I'm still doing sugar and adult beverages only on the weekends. And Easter is going to be difficult for me this probably towards the end of this week because I can eat. I don't know if you guys ever, when I was growing up, every year we got those Peter Rabbit chocolate bunnies that are in the yellow box. They're like this tall and I can put like a whole one of those bunnies down in one sitting. So that's going to be very difficult for me. Okay. I had a funny story. I love jokes. I love funny stories. So I wanted to read you guys this one that I heard last weekend. An old man lived out in the country and wanted to dig his potato garden. But it was very hard because the ground was very hard. His best friend, Fred, who used to help him, was in prison serving 20 years for a crime he had been convicted of. The old man wrote a letter to his prison buddy and described his predicament. Dear Fred, I'm feeling pretty bad right now because it looks like I won't get to plant my potato garden this year. I'm getting too old to be digging the plot by myself. If you were here, all my troubles would be over because I know you would dig the plot for me. Love, Tom. A few days later, he received a letter from Fred, who wrote this from jail. Dear Tom, for heaven's sake, don't dig up that garden. That's where I buried the bodies. Love, Fred. 6 a.m. the next morning, FBI agents showed up at Fred's house and dug up the entire garden to find no bodies. They apologized to Tom and left. The next day, Tom received another letter from prison from his friend Fred that said, Dear Tom, go ahead and plant the potatoes now. That's the best I could do under the circumstances. Love, Fred. I thought that was so funny. I love that. Good jokes are always funny to hear. That my papa was the master of joke tellers, and so I always like to find new ones. So a couple things I'm going to share with you today. I just was recently listening to a podcast. I don't know if any of you have heard of Dr. Caroline Leaf. She wrote. I have not read this book. I just ordered it actually yesterday. Called Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess. I heard her at an event in Atlanta probably 4 years ago, I want to say. And I love how, Jess, I'm glad you like that. I love how Dr. Caroline Leaf, she has studied the mind and the brain for 38 years. And she's a genius when it comes to it. So I love learning from her. And she was recently on John Maxwell's podcast. She's been on our friend who's been on with us before, Tyler Dickerhoof's podcast. And so I love learning from her. So a couple of things I wanted to share with you from her recent podcast episode and her website that I thought were great in regards to your mindset. This was something really interesting to me. So I think a lot of times we think of the mind and the brain as one thing, and really those are two different things. So she says the mind is actually how you think, feel, and choose. Those three things are like interlocking circles, and I'll show you that. The mind is actually not the brain. The mind actually controls the brain. So she says it's that desire to stand back and observe your own choices and your own thinking, feeling, and choosing that enables you to start taking the energy away from the toxic in the brain in your body, in your mind, and then you reconstruct it to build something that's more wise. We're going to post some of this in our group, but this is how she explains it. And I just think that oh, thank you, Heather. There's the link to the book if any of you would like to look at that. So here's what she says. Our mind controls how we think, how we feel, how we choose. And when I heard her about it's either 4 or 5 years ago, I can't remember when at that event, but this is what she originally talked about. And I took all these notes, and now I love that she's transferred this into her new book. So she says, our minds are actually wired for, hold on. Our minds are actually wired for optimism, and the brain is wired for love. So she says they both go towards survival. It's kind of that gut feeling that you have inside of us. Sometimes some of us would say we either have a really good intuition or we have a really poor intuition, but we are able as humans to use it to see how we think, feel, and choose. And then that's actually what determines the decisions that we make in our life. She says a wise decision or a toxic decision to influence yourself to make, that's actually your mind that does that. We can assess, are we making a decision from a wise place or are we making a decision from a toxic place? She goes super deep. I had to listen to it like 3 times, parts of it, but I'm going to take it to like a simpler level. She said, your primary responsibility is to choose your thinking, because if you can choose and control how you think, then that's going to spill over into how you feel and the choices that you make in your life. So a couple of keynotes that I found very interesting. Things that can create a mental mess are stress and anxiety of just the day-to-day. She talks a lot about 2020 and the pandemic. And John Maxwell's been talking a lot about that too. Sometimes past trauma, sometimes you actually do have a chemical imbalance or you may have a health issue. This was interesting. Did you know that we can go 3 weeks without food, 3 days without water, 3 minutes without oxygen, but we cannot go 3 seconds without using our mind? You're actually always using your mind every second. Actually, I think she was saying it goes 4 million something, I'm missing the word, but per second that you actually think. Only 3% of leaders or people actually will talk about your mental health today in public, which is kind of crazy. She says your lifestyle is driven by your mind. And we've probably talked about this before, but one of my favorite John Maxwell quotes, I just realized the end of my last sentence cut off. Shoot, I'll find it and read it to you guys. But John always says the greatest gap between successful and unsuccessful people is actually how they think. And if you think about that, you're always thinking one way or the other, right? You're always thinking, positive or negative. You're always thinking something that can be successful or unsuccessful, but the way that people actually choose or the way that people show up in being successful or unsuccessful is actually how they think. The last sentence is just a verse for people of faith. And basically it says, you'll do your best by filling your mind and meditating on the things that are true, noble, reputable, authentic, compelling, gracious, the best things, not the worst things, the beautiful things, not the ugly things, the things that go to praise, not the things that go to negative or curse. Put into practice what you learn when you meditate and fill your mind on those things. And that's how you'll do your best work. So sorry that cut off, but for people of faith, you can look up that verse. So she talks about an example that she recently did. She did a experimental study on control groups. And she filled, I think she said 400 people, I want to say was what it was in a room. She says, if you teach a person how to stand back and observe their thinking, feeling, and choosing, which again is their mind, it can actually change how they function and their behaviors. On the study that she did, 81% improvement was found in people who in how someone functioned in their life and how they deal with anything stress related when they actually learn to manage their mind. So when they did the experiment and they figured out how to manage their mind, when they entered into a stressful situation, they actually completely handled it differently than those that didn't. Some of you have heard of telomeres. My friend and mentor, Linda McKissick, talks about telomeres all the time. And she actually, she has a doctor that functional medicine doctor that measures her telomeres. I had never even heard the word until she said that before. But basically, it's how you're managing your mind. You're making millions of cells every single second. The quality of those cells are actually determined by your telomeres. And so that determines your mind. So they can shorten and that can negatively affect your mind, or your telomeres can lengthen and that can positively affect your mind. And so she goes on to talk about this, Dr. Caroline Leaf, in her notes from her book. I read kind of the short version of it until the actual book comes, but there are certain things that you can do to measure and to lengthen and to grow your telomeres, and it has to do with your age. So you'll see sometimes that someone's chronological age may be 30 years old, but if they have a lot of stress, if their telomeres are short, then their psychological age could be 60 years old. Or you could have the opposite effect. You could be 60 years old in real life chronologically, but if you have worked on your mindset and you have a great lengthening habit with your telomeres, then you actually could psychologically have the mind of and be the age of in your 30s or 40s. There's a lot of people that are a lot smarter than me that know how to talk about that stuff. One of my things on my vision board this year was to find a functional medicine doctor. I have been given 2 recommendations. I have not reached out to them yet, so somebody hold me accountable to do that. But here's what she says: what happens to me and what happens in me don't have to be the same thing. So what happens to you and what happens in you don't have to be the same thing. John Maxwell talks about 2020 being the year of shock and numb all the time, because truly we were shocked by it and then we just became numb by it, because we've never experienced anything like that before. We haven't. It has probably before us. There's been tons of pandemics, but for most of us, it's the only thing we've ever actually experienced. So he says, but what's happening to us during COVID, you can't control. But what's happening in you, you can control. You can be better on the inside than you actually are on the outside. And all of that has to do with your mindset. John says all the time, we need more leaders who can help and lift people up during crisis. Fully transparent. That's why I started this 48 weeks ago. I mean, it's almost been a year. And it's because I was like, okay, whoa, everything's shut down. Everybody's freaking out. Monica, you were there on the very first one, I think. So you probably remember. I'm like, okay, we got to work on people's mindset. We can't like dip into this horrible place where we can't go to the grocery and we can't get our hair done and we can't play golf. So our world's shutting down. We have to actually control we can't control what's happening to us, but we can control how we react. So he says all the time, ask yourself when you are going to get in control of what you know to be real, which are your values. How can you get in control of your values? So I've shared this before. I love it. If you realize truly how powerful your thoughts are, you would never think another negative thought again. Wouldn't that be great if we could never think another negative thought again? I think them a lot. And I work on my mindset a lot and I still think about them. But here's what she says: whatever we think about the most grows. So if you go back to this, if you realize how powerful your thoughts are, you would never think a negative thought again. It's because whatever we think the most about is actually grows. That's what becomes more of. When you think, feel, and choose, you build that into your brain as a thought. You build the response into 3 different places in your brain. I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to even try to explain those. But the more that you think about it, the more it grows. So she says, imagine it like a tree with roots. So every time you're thinking negative thoughts, those thoughts are growing more and more roots. The tree's growing and it's leading to the branches. The memories and thoughts, as you keep going over and over and over and over and over in your brain, you're actually giving it more physical energy in your mind. You're strengthening your DNA, which is so insane if you really think about it. The more you think about something, you're actually making mental changes in your mind and in your DNA. Then it gets bigger and bigger. She has literally 38 years of research to prove this. Energy is transferred. Remember, it's never lost. That's like actually a scientific fact. Energy is always transferred. It's never lost. So if you think about that, your energy is getting poured into if your energy is getting poured into a toxic way of thinking, whatever has the most energy given to it is the thought that's going to dominate the most. Then this is the scary part. Then it moves to your conscious mind. So if you're always thinking negative thoughts or you have a toxic way of thinking, then your energy is being poured into that. You're actually having that be the dominant thought in your mind and in your brain. Then it starts to move into your conscious mind. So before you even know it, it's like the roots and the branches are growing. Your negative thoughts are growing and growing and growing. So she really says we have to be aware of it, number one. And you have to stand back and assess your wisdom. Why am I thinking like this? she says, then you're enabled to start taking the energy away from that and start building something positive and different. So I know that's kind of deep and a lot to think about. However, I would just really challenge you, Amy. Oh, I love that. Yeah. What you focus on expands. It's exactly that, the very definition of that, because no matter if you're thinking really positive thoughts, then you're probably seeing those positive things come out in your life. Or if you're constantly thinking toxic and negative thoughts, then that's what's going to show up, because it's actually building a place and living inside of your mind and inside of your brain. So I'm actually going to finish a little early today, but before, I want to relate this to a story. I'm going back now. I've told you guys I read this book, Chase the Lion. My friend Jen Davis gave me this. Dick, you probably know Jen Davis and Dan Holt. Jen gave me this book, and she actually said something one time that I thought was so good, and I never heard her say that before. She was teaching a real estate related event for me, and she said, Dana, all I do is I focus on what I do with my time, talent, and my treasure. And I said, did you come up with that? That's like the smartest thing I've ever heard. And she said, no, I got it out of this book that I love, that I just finished reading, by Mark Batterson, called Chase the Lion. So I said, oh, I got to read that. I would love it. And I'm sure I would love it, because I love that. Because think about it. What are you going to do with your time, your talent, and your treasure, right? Your money, what you've been blessed with. And so 2 days later, this showed up at my house, and Jen had sent it to me. I read it in 2 days and am obsessed with it. But what I do is I like to read and hold, but then I highlight and note, and then I go back and take those and type them into notes on my computer. So I was going back this weekend, and I found this story that I really like. I did not know, I'm not a huge Redskins fan, but this is Kirk Cousins. Is anybody a Redskins fan and know who this was? He played for the Redskins in 2015 during the NFL season. And I just thought this was a really great story. And so I wanted to share it with you guys. It says, during the 2015 NFL season, Kirk Cousins broke almost every Washington Redskins passing record on the books. He also led the Skins to the largest comeback in their storied 83-year history. The Redskins were trailing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers by 24 points in the third quarter when Kirk tied a single game record with 33 completions. His 317 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 124.7 rating were enough to get the win on the last-second touchdown pass to tight end Jordan Reed. On the way into the locker room, Kirk yelled, "You like that?" Redskin fans have been chanting it ever since. Before his senior season at Michigan State, Kirk's mom gave him a copy of the book that was the book before this one, called In the Pit with a Lion on a Snowy Day. That's the title of the book. That was Mark Batterson's first book. In the Pit with a Lion on a Snowy Day. Kirk was reading it right before one of the biggest games of the season. The Big Ten championship was on the line, and Kirk was as anxious as he'd ever been before in a football game of his life. When he arrived at Penn State, home of the Lions, it was snowing. Their stadium, with its steep sides and field built deep into the ground, feels just like a pit. He thought how fitting that his mom had actually given him, and he was reading In a Pit with a Lion on a Snowy Day. So he actually showed up in a big way. Despite the 108,000 Lion fans cheering against him, right before running out of the tunnel, Coach Mark, who was his coach, threw out a question to his team. Does anybody know what Psalm 91 says? His quarterback knew the answer. You will trample the lions. With that, the team prayed and then played their way to win a 28-22 victory and a piece of the Big Ten title. If you follow professional football, you know that Kirk's journey has been anything but a 45-degree angle to success. He wasn't drafted in the first round. He rode the bench his first season. He had his fair share of ups and downs, but when others give in, lion chasers step up. When they experience a setback, they know that God already has prepared their comeback. They have a plan. After games, Kirk and his wife, Julie, they often pop into a local coffee shop, which is actually owned by Mark Batterson. He said, I'll tell you this, Kirk is the same person after a loss as he is after a big win. He knows that success is more than winning or losing a football game. It's how you handle adversity. It's how you handle disappointment. It's how you handle mistakes. It's how you handle an offense. That those things will make you bitter or better. I love that. The answer is up to you. Even if it isn't your fault, you can take responsibility. Don't let it steal your joy. Let it fuel your fire. The goal isn't winning. For people of faith, this is what he says. The goal is God's glory. And it isn't contingent upon the final score. That is the final score. It's actually truly how you handle things and how your mindset is and what you believe. And I just thought that was such a great story for us to end on today. because I believe that that's very true. For those of you, if anybody has read this book, I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Oh, thanks. Heather posted it in the chat also. It's so good. And especially if you are a person of faith, you'll really like it. But the title is the subtitle is if your dream doesn't scare you, it's too small. So I would suggest anybody to read this. TT's on today. There's my friend Tyler. Love it. With your cards I see in your hand. All right, you guys, hope that you like that. Hope it gave you a little inspiration for the rest of your week. And thanks for hopping on, and go make it a great week. Happy Easter. Everybody have a great Easter. See you guys.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye.